It's Electric Drives. Your electric vehicle future starts right now. Welcome to the show. I'm Anthony Algmin, and I'm joined by my co-host, Bob Reese. We created this show to make it easier for others looking to move to electric vehicles, and that's more and more people every day. We're out there using EVs in normal commutes and road trips, and we'll share the wisdom we've gained from living our lives with electric vehicles. You can join in the conversation by sending your questions and topic ideas to questions@electricdrives.us, by joining our Facebook group, or by becoming a patron at patreon.com/electric drives to get exclusive content and help support the show. Bob, how are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good. Pretty good.
Good to hear. I am doing all right as well. And so today we have a question from the mailbag that we are going to talk about to begin today's episode. And I'm going to just read the question. We can have that conversation. And be forewarned, Bob has no idea what the question is. We did not prep at all for this. So we are just going to fly by it. There's actually many questions in this. I will read through the whole thing, and then I'll make sure we cover it all. So this question's from Jeff. Enjoy the show. We'll be joining the electric community as soon as I have a VW that has recently started its journey from Tennessee to southern Delaware. I can only assume that's a VW ID4, which I have been the proud owner of for approximately like 4 months. I had it. Anyway, Jeff says, have questions regarding home charging. Where I live, there are limited fast chargers around, only really any out by the beaches. Sounds like a nice place to live. Oh. So I will predominantly charge at home and will be installing a ChargePoint home charger that gets me a discount through my electric utility. Well done. Yeah. With cell phones and small electronics, it tends to be worse for battery life to recharge the battery when it's not close to depleted. My daughter is a prime example with her iPad. Battery life has diminished as she constantly plugs it in for 5 minutes, then unplugs, then repeats this. Why is this not the case for cars? So we're going to talk about battery depletion. We're also going to talk about, so should I plug the car in every day, even if I only depleted, say, 5% of range? With no fast chargers in the area, I would like to keep the car at 80% as much as possible, but don't want to affect the life of the battery. So that's kind of part 2 of the first question. Then the last question is also, I will keep my car outside at all times. Anything I should be worried about with charging my car in the rain or snow? And what about thunderstorms? So let's go to the first question first. So why is it that cars' batteries do not deplete to the same level that our personal electronics like phones and tablets do? Bob, what's your take on that?
I think the automobile manufacturers have done a very good job on battery maintenance as far as figuring out how to charge it in a proper method. I mean, you take a look at any car, even your Tesla, as you approach the high end of the battery, it reduces the charge, so it's not taking on as much current and so on, so it's not going to burn it out. So I think the manufacturers have done a real good job of working with that long life. Don't forget, a lot of them have to guarantee, I think for California, is it 150,000 miles? That the battery is going to be around for that period of time. So they do a good job of making sure the battery's well taken care of.
I would equate it to being more active battery management. Like, they know that there's headroom in the batteries, first off,
right,
that they don't fully unlock. Second, if you're only charging to 80%, there's a lot of electronic and computer systems that are allowing you to charge to 80%. The battery has to know it's at 80% and it has to stop you from charging. There's circuits involved in a car's battery, these big battery packs, that our personal electronics just don't have. It would be too unwieldy in the portable electronics. It wouldn't be a good enough payoff because the energy it takes to maintain that kind of stuff and to have that kind of computational horsepower running to know what the battery situation is and how to load balance across the cells and all that stuff doesn't work at the smaller scale. And so when we're plugging in our phones to 100% every night and putting it under that chemical stress that those battery packs have in our personal devices, it's inevitable that those are going to deplete quickly. I mean, I don't know of a single phone that allows you to say, I only want to charge this thing to 80%, whereas literally every car has that built in on the electric vehicle side. And so I think it's really about the scale at those small personal devices really just doesn't allow for us to have that kind of longevity in our personal devices that we can in the cars. And I think there's more headroom built into the cars as well. And so I think that's really the key of the answer. The other question, and I know, Bob, you have a strong opinion on this.
Well, going back to the
Yeah.
first point too, um, I've noticed my cell phone when I plug it in going to bed, it says, "Okay, you're getting up at 5:30 tomorrow morning or
Mhm.
5:15," and it says it will be fully charged by then. It
Yeah.
does a very slow charging rate rather than a typical fast charger rate that you might have during the day when you're plugging it in and making phone calls and so on. So
Mm-hmm.
it knows that the night is quiet for it, and it has the circuitry so it doesn't charge as fast as it would during the day.
Yeah, that's a good point. I have seen that on my phone as well, and I'm skeptical as to how well that actually works because when I wake up, it's still at 100%. But maybe it is just charging slower so that it's not sitting at that 100% while still plugged in. Um, Under normal circumstances, because I think that's actually what hurts the battery life even more is when you're overcharging. When it's at 100%, you're still plugged in on the phone, and it's still trying to take a charge. It doesn't know how to cut it all off, or it's constantly cycling to that last 1%. So I think it's just it's just not as sophisticated as the cars are in the end.
Mm-hmm.
um so the question though, I think because we can hypothesize about that, it could vary from car to car, it could vary from battery to battery, it doesn't
Yeah,
really matter, it's not going to change any of our behaviors, because when it comes down to it, we know that it's probably better if you don't need the range to go to 80%. I think that's kind of a standard at this point, is to say, okay, don't charge to 100% anymore if you don't need that range at that time. But I think it's an interesting question around, well, if you know in your car you can set it to that 80% cap, so we're not suggesting you charge to 100%, but if you can set it to that 80% cap, should you just keep your car plugged in all the time, even though it's not really going to be drawing a whole lot? What's your take on this, even though I already know what your take on this is?
yeah. My take on it is from what I've seen since my Volt days, which was ABC, always be charging,
Mm-hmm.
because it's going to maintain the battery temperature on the big battery at a certain level too, so that
Mm-hmm.
when it does start out in the morning, it's at the proper temperature, the most efficient operating temperature.
That's right.
So,
Yeah, it can use the power source that it's plugged into for all of those maintenance activities, and it can kind of overweight how much it does those, because it knows, hey, I have this unlimited source of energy. It doesn't waste it, but it can do those maintenance activities drawing from the power supply as opposed to the battery, and that actually helps the longevity of the battery. So I get what Jeff is
right.
saying and why the question exists of, like, do should I even have it plugged in, or am I causing more stress on the battery? That's a logical question, but the answer is you're actually causing less stress on the battery, because for those maintenance things, for the ongoing conditioning of the battery, the temperature controls and all of that, it can use the external power supply, and so it doesn't have to charge and discharge cells in the battery to make that stuff happen, and it can keep that battery at a ready to go
Correct.
state and just focus on the rest. And that's really, it's not an obvious thing if you're not an EV owner or haven't been for a while. Like, you don't realize that that's how that works. But yeah, anytime my car is in my garage, it is plugged in. And that's just
Mm-hmm.
it. It doesn't use it for anything. It will you'll keep the battery at a certain temperature. We'll use that the plugged-in charge to precondition the car when it knows I'm going to leave at 7 in the morning, or what have you, on weekdays. But yeah, I mean, it's just a simple, it's a nice thing. This is the thing. Like, if you've only ever driven gas cars and you're listening to this show and you're like, oh, this is interesting, I can promise you there's nothing as cool as having, like, a ready to go car every single day of the week, where you don't ever have to go to a gas station to do your normal commute. Now, Bob, this doesn't apply to
Oh
you
yeah.
because your commute's like hundreds and hundreds of miles a lot of the time, and you're staying at hotels or
Mm-hmm.
whatever. But for me, who's driving 76 or so miles round trip every single day, every morning I start that car at 80%. Every morning I get back, it's at about 50%. And that's only because I've been running Sentry mode all day. So it uses a few percent doing that. And so, like, I have plenty of headroom, but it's so nice to just have it ready to go. It's just like your phone every day. It's like, it's ready to go. And it's,
Right.
you get used to it. You really get used to it. It's nice. I highly
And
recommend.
it doesn't take any time out of your day. You're not having to drive to a gas station,
Mm-hmm.
wait for the gas station pump to be available, pull into the slot, get out of the car, walk around the car, go to the pump, put in the credit card information, then put it into your car, and then start it up and everything else.
Mm-hmm.
It, I mean, this is like under 30 seconds each time you do it.
Yeah. Yeah. And even if I, honestly, even if I didn't have home charging and I had to run to the supercharger a couple times a week or whatever, like the supercharger
Yeah.
closest to me is right outside of Panera. And you know what? I could go to Panera in the morning. I could go get a bagel. I did this in my Tesla charging thing before I took my first road trip, is like, go and get a bagel, have a coffee, spend 20 minutes there. I'll have plenty of energy to get me to and from wherever I need to go. And it's,
Right, right. Well, that could lead into my conversation about my
exactly.
trip at the end of last week. I had to go to a customer site in Upper Wisconsin. So I did over 2 days. I did 747 miles distance for a total cost of $1.07. And it turned out that Electrify America is having updates on their software and some of their facilities and so on. So when I left home, I stopped in Rockford to use the restroom, and that was free. So there was just a short stop there. And then I got to Madison, Wisconsin, and charged over lunch there. And then I went up to the Midwest Renewable Energy Association in Custer,
Oh, yeah.
Wisconsin, which was basically another restroom stop. And that one was free. And that got me enough that I could get to the motel with enough range. At the motel, I had to plug into just a wall outlet. So I
Oh,
only picked up 40 miles overnight there. And of course, that was free. And then I did my business up there. And coming back, I stopped for lunch at a Chevy dealer in Merrill, Wisconsin. And that one was free. And then I took a restroom break in Stevens Point, Wisconsin, at a Hyundai dealership that has a charge point there. Excuse me. And the charge point is where I paid the $1.07.
I want to
But
ask you about that. Not about the specific instance, because obviously if you're paying for the charge point, it doesn't really matter that it was at a Hyundai dealership or what have you. But when you are like going to a place like a car dealership, can you go, like, you're driving a Chevy Bolt?
yep,
Could you go to a Hyundai dealership that only had like a level 2 charger and plug in there? Would they give you like the side eye if you did that, or is it, what are the rules
they
around that?
they used to have it turned off.
Mm.
In fact, when they first started up, when ChargePoint first installed that one, they had it where they were charging visitors and so on. And then they made it private where only people from the dealership could authorize to use it.
Mm.
And they realized that, heck, with us coming in and using it, we're paying for the electricity, and maybe we'll do some window shopping while we're there and see some of their products. So
No
they've
doubt.
opened it up again.
I would
And
totally end up with a Hyundai Ioniq 5 if I were charging my old like ID4 or Mach-E or something like that. I totally would be that guy who's like, yeah, I got my car over here. Let's trade. I'll buy yours instead.
right, right.
Yeah.
And no, they didn't. There was two salesmen outside talking within maybe 25 feet of where I was parked charging, and they didn't say a word to me. They realize that we're paying for the electricity.
Mhm.
They charge $5 an hour to charge, and that's a
Mm.
62 kilowatt charger.
Okay.
So, $1.07 is just a portion of the hour. So it was fine and dandy. It worked out well for me.
That's nice.
It was a restroom stop, and then it also made sure I had enough buffer to make it back to Madison, Wisconsin for the next charging excursion and dinner.
And that's the big takeaway here is that we've now reached a point with these electric vehicles that they need to stop and charge less than you need to stop and charge. Like I
Yes.
need to use the bathroom or I need to take a break or I should take a break and then the car's like, cool, man, I'll take some charge. It's fine. Do what you got to do. And like I just never found that um I was waiting for the car much. Like and anytime I did have to wait, it was like a handful of minutes. Like I've waited so much longer for so much less in other places. I don't know. It's really just I think until you've been doing it, like it's just this fear because it's different, but it's overblown. I think it's just so easy to work with these now.
Right, right. And like tonight, I've got the car and the charger at the motel, and I'll start out tomorrow with a full charge and be able to do most my whole day on that and not have to worry about it. Come back and plug in as soon as I get back.
Yeah. Yeah, that's nice. That's cool. And I love hearing about your kind of adventures on the road because you're always going to different places. A lot of them you've been to before at some point or another, but it kind of your normal daily adventures of going to work at the various places you have to go to give us a sense of what's happening out there that I think a lot of us just won't see. Like I see my one thing all the time. And then
Mm-hmm.
occasionally you'll take a road trip. And, I have now driven, hundreds of miles several times. And it's fun. It's easy. It's good. I'm actually looking forward to putting my winter tires on the car. In about a month or so, I'll probably put those on, and I have them now. I've purchased them, and yeah, I'm excited for driving this car in the winter time. I'm excited for seeing how how it behaves on the road when it's slippery out, and I expect it'll do very well. Um,
Yeah, because you got all-wheel drive basically.
I do. Yeah, I have all-wheel drive, and with proper snow tires, even in Chicago, like you can really get through anything. Like with four-wheel drive and proper tires, like I'm going to be a monster on the road. So,
Right. You
um,
just have to worry about ground clearance.
yeah, and honestly, my ground clearance is not that bad. Occasionally I scrape on the ground, but it's just because I have mud flaps that I added, and so it's always the mud flaps that are what hit the
Mm-hmm.
ground. But I've got several inches of ground clearance. I've never really scraped it on like a speed bumper or anything like that. So before we go, there was one more question from Jeff before I kind of just let us go into the road trip story because it fits so well. But Jeff did ask, he's like, I will keep my car outside at all times. Is there anything that he should worry about with charging the car in the rain or snow, or what about thunderstorms? Now, Bob, you're constantly using charging overnight at hotels or what have you, all kinds of weather. Is there anything we need to worry about in terms of thunderstorms, lightning, any of that stuff?
Supposedly, first off, the charger. The charger is actually the car.
Mhm.
So the EVSE really is just a giant filter. So it's taking any type of dirty circuitry or whatever and filtering it out.
Mhm.
So lightning's probably the only suspect where you have the spikes come through, but the boxes that they furnish from the manufacturers have enough filters and so on it that it shouldn't be an issue.
Yeah,
Uh,
and they have the ground
and
fault
I've
interruptions built in, right? Like
Oh
those
yes,
are,
yeah,
they're pretty advanced from that perspective. Now, granted, if it lightning bolt were to hit where you are charging, just like anything, there could be some damage there, but there's no excess risk or likelihood of that. Think about how many times have a lightning strike fried your home.
yeah.
It's about the same chances, I think, in terms of frying your car. And so I don't see that being a great likelihood, despite the fact that you're going to be charging in, you know, thunderstorms and rain and snow and stuff all the time. So having this kind of setup outside, all of those EVSEs are rated to be installed outside, and so you should be
I
pretty good to
really
go.
read the fine print. There are some that are highly suspect.
Mm.
There are a couple of manufacturers that definitely there's no qualms about them, and I've got the one from GM that I've had sitting in snow outside and sitting in snowstorms with an extension cord, and so the whole box is sitting out there in the rain or the snow or whatever,
Yeah.
and I haven't had any issues yet.
And typically, I mean, like I can speak to the ChargePoint Home Flex, which is what I own as well. And in a permanent mount situation, or even if you're using the plug, if you're mounting it on a pole or whatever, you're going to be fine. Like, and
Yeah.
a lot of folks will mount them to the outside of their garages because they're going to want to be able to park sometimes maybe in the garage, sometimes outside the garage. There's a lot of flexibility you can have with routing that cable in and out of your garage. I've seen people that have installed the EVSE on the inside of their garage to keep it added protection from weather or vandalism or whatever, and literally have just routed the cord to the outside of the garage, and they're always parking the car outside and the cord is just out there. Like, do what makes sense in your home situation, but from a safety perspective, you should be okay. You should be just fine.
Yeah,
So with that, go
we
ahead.
have the connector, we have the boxes inside at the front of the garage, and we have an extension cord that you can buy. Um, it extends from the J1772 to the input on the car. So it plugs in and it gives me an extension cord of another 20 feet. So
Oh,
that's why when my daughter comes home from work, she can be outside the garage and be plugged in and get juice for overnight. Or
mm,
if I'm outside and plugged in, I can get juice overnight.
that's great. That's great. All right. Well, Bob, anything else before we go on tonight's episode?
No, I think that's it.
All right. Well, that wraps up our show for today. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that YouTube bell icon. Please send your questions and topic suggestions to questions@electricdrives.us, and we'd love for you to join us on Facebook and Patreon. All the links are, of course, in the show notes. Thank you for spending some time with us, and we wish you a smooth road ahead on your own electric drive.